Picture this. It's a stormy Christmas night in 1821 London, and in the dark and dimly lit Royal Institution, a young Michael Faraday steps up. Armed with nothing but a coiled wire and a magnet, he demonstrates the wonder of electromagnetism. The same electromagnetic force enlightens the entire Royal Institution today, and the one that we're standing in. Now, what's surprising is that Faraday had little to no formal education. How exactly, then, did he achieve this? You see, Faraday had a deep intuitive sense of spatial thinking. But Faraday is not alone. This story of his spatial genius sets the stage for my own story from 6 years ago. Come with me to my 9th grade classroom back in New Delhi, India, where I sat bored and unamused as I was required to work on the annual science fair project. The topic assigned to me was math in mazes, and as a child who passionately despised mathematics, you can imagine my lack of motivation. However, at the time, I had taken to this iPad game called Makeorama. And in this game, as you can see, there is a tiny bot stuck inside a maze, and you need to help this bot navigate its way from the start point to the end point of the maze. While I was thoroughly disinterested in coming up with a science fair project, I did think it would be cool to build a similar maze from scratch. So I went down to the mathematics lab and brought some Lego-like cubes called Jodo cubes and started building this maze piece by piece. Slowly, my team and I began doing some research, and we found a strong relationship between spatial ability and maze solving. We wondered if our maze could function as a spatial intelligence test for young children. So, to run this experiment, my teammate Akshat and I redesigned and rebuilt our maze entirely from scratch. Our maze was dynamic, such that it allowed 100+ solvable patterns simply by exchanging parts of the maze with each other. Our maze went from looking something like this to looking something like this. Our experiment involved 400 children aged 8 to 10 years, and what we found was truly astonishing. 110 out of these 400 children performed extremely well on the maze task. But this isn't the crazy part. What was crazy was that 86 out of these 110 high performers had been labeled as slow learners by their teachers in their classrooms. Why was this? Why were these kids who had been labeled as slow learners suddenly the best at something? Even better than the academically strong kids? We found that most countries all over the globe, including India, structure their school curricula and lesson plans in a way that requires students to use either their numeric abilities or their language abilities. However, these kids, much like Faraday, were spatial geniuses. They had incredible space visualization abilities as compared to their weaker numeric and language abilities. Today's teaching models were unsuitable for these spatial learners. This is why they were underperforming in the first place. if you were to teach them, say, the subject of mathematics using puzzles, playing blocks, or even mazes, they would perform at the same pace as everyone else. Hence, kids, when taught in the medium they prefer, they are bound to excel. Today, in several parts of the world, millions and millions of children are burying the possibility of becoming a scientist, a writer, or an artist simply because they don't excel in an ill-fitting classroom. And the lack of these inclusive classrooms is depriving our world of future Nobel laureates, Pulitzer Prize winners, political revolutionaries, and so many more. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, 53% of children in low and middle-income countries could not read or perform basic mathematical operations by the age of 10. This number represents the learning poverty index of the globe, and it has only worsened since the pandemic hit our society. Educational systems continue to be the most stagnant global systems, where the traditional teaching practices take precedence over newer technology or the ever-changing learner demographics. So, in today's Ideas That Inspire, I bring to you the idea of a world where school is not just a place to identify that you're weak at math, but to actually become better at it. Let's have assessments for each grade level that test foundational concepts and ensure that each and every child, by the end of the academic year, gains a 100% score on these assessments. So that tomorrow, if your child decides not to pursue science, it's not because he feels he can't do it. It's because he has the freedom to choose. He is as capable of being a scientist as he is of being a writer. It boils down to his choice, not his ability. Can you visualize a classroom where you can do more than rote memorize the multiplicative table of 17? Where you can use interactive software to immediately see that a grid made up of 17 rows and 6 columns has 102 squares? A classroom where you can do more than read a textbook to learn about history? Where you can use interactive storyboards or participate in the reenactment of the civil rights movement? A classroom where your understanding of history is not measured by your ability to follow a 500-page book. Personally, going from a child who passionately despised mathematics to working as a research assistant for the Mathematical Thinking Lab at one of the most highly ranked universities in the world for research, I have realized the power of adaptive teaching. Today, as we reap the benefits of Faraday's unguided brilliance, can you imagine what today's young Faradays would discover and achieve with the right instruction and guidance? Let's blur the limits of education by unblurring foundational concepts for today's young minds. Because in the realm of education, the medium should not limit the message. Thank you.